Hello, welcome back to the SideQuest RPG Podcast. I'm your host, Smug, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mindz.
Hey, how's it going?
And I know we had a little bit of a hiatus again after we said there wouldn't be a hiatus, but we both had some things come up this week, and we are back and ready to go. I believe you had something interesting happen in your campaign. I wanted to talk about that. So how's your recent campaign been going? The Friday night one.
Friday night has been going very well. We were sent back in time to stop an artifact from being made. This artifact is used to control time, which is how we got back to the past.
Mm-hmm.
After saving that, we came back and found that we were attacked by an archdevil that came out from one of the flames cards that I had pulled.
Oh,
And yeah, we are all level 13.
13. Oh, okay.
So I could fly. I have my third level spell slots. My problem is all my spells do fire damage. The Archdevil is immune to fire.
Yep.
I can also, if I hit a target with a spell, it produces a vulnerability. If they're resistant to my Draconic Heritage, it will knock it down so that they're not resistant at all. And if they're immune, it will take that immunity down to resistant. So
Okay.
it's a great ability to hit him with a spell and then hit him with my fire breath, which is what the entire build revolves around. However, this
Yes.
archdevil has an int of 30, and my spell that I can hit it with is Mind Sliver. It's an int save.
Yeah.
Not very fun. I have 150 something hit points. I think 156. I was hit the first turn for a crit, and Balors, when they crit for 3 times damage on top of what they roll. So I was hit for 138 damage.
Jeez.
That was the first attack.
What kind of balancing does Will do?
Everybody is max hit points. But
Fuck.
this one just happened to be that it crit. It did. And it's not anything that Will did for the balancing and all that. It really put a sense of urgency on this thing.
Okay.
So it knocked me down to like 20 something hit points. And it has a multi attack as well.
Oh, God. Did it hit you the second time?
It didn't. It
Oh.
missed. I got healed for 40 something or 20 something damage or 20 something hit points. So I was back up to 50. I tried to escape around the corner, and out comes the whip from the Balor, which pulled me back right towards him.
Oh, God.
So he hit me again. And since I was back at 27, he hit me for exactly 27 hit points.
Oh, man.
Knocked me down, unconscious. My paladin party member cast whatever the sphere, resilient sphere, I think it is. And since the archdevil was focused on me, the archdevil then ended up falling down. Our barbarian ripped its wing off, or broke its wing, so it only had one, and literally fell down 100 plus feet down to the crypt or the sewers below that we had entered in through this temple.
Yeah.
It teleported back up. So now our barbarian and our paladin are down below. There's me, there's our ranger, and there's our celestial warlock.
Oh, no.
And we're all upstairs. So the archdevil, jumps across this gap that the entire church floor that has broken as it fell down to the sewers below.
Mm-hmm.
It literally jumps on, right above me, smacks me with its sword with the multi attack, which knocks the sphere off and down into the sewer. Well, hang on. I made my first death saving throw.
Good.
It knocks me off and I fall down 100 feet. And because of the fact that the sphere doesn't take any damage, it's like, say you're in a falling elevator and the elevator stops when it hits the ground. You hit the bottom of the elevator and take damage. So I took,
Oh, no.
even at half, I took, 34 fall damage, which means 2 death saving throws failed. I make my next saving throw. and they're all fighting the archdevil.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they get the archdevil down to like, I would assume 30 something hit points. I go to make my final death saving throw. I roll a 4. I die, which throws the rest of the party into a
Panic, pick him up, pick him up, pick him up. Use Revivify if you can. Do what you can.
well, the thing is, the archdevil doesn't disappear from the flames card. It just means that its mission is accomplished, and now it's trying to go after the people that tried to rip its wing off.
Oh, no.
So, again, this is a Baylor, mind you.
Yeah.
It jumps up to the second level of the balcony where our warlock is. And our barbarian runs up as well, because he can run up the walls, being an athlete and an eagle barbarian. So he goes up and he clobbers this thing with his sword. Well, what happens when a Baylor dies? You know?
It explodes, I think.
It does, which takes out both our barbarian and the warlock.
No.
So 3 of our 5 party were knocked unconscious. I died. Luckily, our paladin was able to get up there in time to stabilize the warlock and then use lay on hands to heal up the barbarian so they were stabilized.
Mm-hmm.
They ran down the stairs down into the sewers where I was, and they were able to cast Revivify on me because there was just enough of my body intact that they could cast it.
God.
So we're all alive. Barely.
Yeah, yikes.
And it's been like a couple days, and I'm playing off the fact that, I'm still recovering. My body is weary. I can hardly talk. I'm just, yeah.
Ooh.
And this is all because we were waiting for this Unity armor, which is a tribute. It's a tribute and a sign that, a sign of peace and prosperity for all of humanity, as a tribute to Kythar, who was our paladin who perished and is now playing our Horizon Walker Wood Elf Ranger. So now we get to hopefully see that be unveiled and then figure out where we're going from here.
Good.
So we're about 2/3 of the way through the campaign, I would imagine.
Right.
It's a lot of fun.
My current party, I would say, is about halfway through their campaign. And we had a rough session last Friday. And I don't mean rough as in it was like grating for the players. It was a close combat, just like similar to what you had, but not quite on such an epic and such a big scale. They ran out of, a lot of them were out of spell slots or low on health. Only the 2 elves had finished their long rest, because elves get shorter long rests. And they were not prepared to be taken captive by 2 people of equal strength to at least one other party member. So the 2 people they ran into that are taking them captive back to the enemy camp are quote unquote equal to a player. Like, that's how I have them built out as NPCs. They're supposed to be part of another quote party that they know about. So they got taken captive. They had met one of these people before, Astrid, who's an Azamar. And Percival owed her a date from their last encounter. So, using that as an excuse, while they're under captivity, she meets up with him, talks to him, and says she wants to change sides. One of her allies is being mind controlled. Help me unmind control her, and I'll get you out of here.
Interesting.
So she made that offer, and they had every opportunity to decline it, to try to escape on their own, to do anything else, to pretend to help her, to actually help her. So they did. But she had one condition. She can't bring all of them out of the cell, of the tent they're hiding in. She can only take 3. So which 3 would she be allowed to take from the group, possibly fight with as an ally, and then get everyone out scot-free?
Oh, and how did they decide?
So Percival went because he has a spell that can hold someone still. So he has a spell that basically paralyzes, but if they get hit by any form of damage, it undoes the paralysis.
All right.
So causes paralysis for 1 minute, but if you get hit or take damage, instantly undone. So they took him so he could hide. Then they took Crix, who is our monk, good hand-to-hand, because the person they're trying to unmind control, I've already thematically and RP-wise established that she is some kind of fist fighter or at least a brute. She's not a mage. She has magic abilities, but she's not a mage per se. So they brought Crix, the monk, who's good hand-to-hand. That's his whole point, right? Then they are deciding who to bring, and they decided to bring Leave, who is Percy's best friend and the NPC of the party. So they bring Leave along, who's really good hand-to-hand with a sword. Like, that's his whole thing. He has a bunch of, like, secondary abilities, like parry, increases armor class. He can redirect attacks and stuff like that because he's a fighter. So that's the 3 they bring against 2 guards that they fought before, but these guards are they got a little boost to their stats because they haven't fought them in like 2 levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they fought this same enemy with the same abilities before. And against her, the person they're trying to save. So it's 3 plus the new NPC that's an ally versus 3. So it's a 4v3. So it starts off, Percy succeeds his spell. She fails the saving throw and is paralyzed as she's trying to walk away from the conversation that was fairly heated. The ally jumps in and tries to pull the ring that has been described to be mind controlling her off, but fails. So the person's paralyzed and you can't pull the ring off. You didn't succeed the strength check to pull the ring off. Because for some reason,
that doesn't sound good.
For some reason, it's latched to her finger. So then combat ensues, and we roll initiative. But I did something interesting. I only have 3 people in the combat. 2 of them are actual players, right? Well, I've got like 5 players. So I took control of the ally NPC and the enemy NPC. I gave 2 of my party members control of the 2 enemy soldiers.
Ooh.
And I gave the other one, the only guy left, control of Leave, who's the best friend of Percy. So it was
Spicy.
Yeah, so everyone got to participate. 2 people got to be bad guys, and they got to strategize on who to aim at. We had fun coming up with names for them, Gerald and Jermaine.
Gerald and Jermaine.
Yeah, we came up with names for him too. Oh, and we can't forget George, the guy who was standing guard in front of their cell. They made friends with George.
Of course. You gotta make friends with the seemingly innocuous NPC.
Oh, yeah. It's just the random guy who happened to be stationed in front of their cell. But regardless, so there's a little combat taking place just outside the camp, so there's no interference. So they're all fighting. Everyone's using abilities, swinging swords. The enemy soldiers have pack tactics, so they're getting advantage all the time on whoever they're aiming at. And at one point, the ally NPC gets rocked by a crit from the enemy NPC. So their ally is like really hurt. And Percival gets the bright idea to let her go invisible. So he casts invisibility on her so she can get out. So she tries to get away, but the enemy NPC has an ability that lets her sense people around her, but she doesn't get...
Blindsight?
No, not blind sight. They have good noses. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So specifically, they have good noses when it comes to people of their kind.
Oh, so they're a very
So
pungent bunch.
when her ally tries to step away, even though she's invisible, she knows. So she gets an attack of opportunity at disadvantage. Rolls a natural 20 and a natural 18.
Wow.
So the natural 18 I take, which still hits her armor class, and the ally goes down, but she's invisible, and Percival did not drop the spell. Her turn comes around, she fails her saving throw.
Oh, no.
Percival's turn comes around, and he uses an ability he has called Amplify, which takes a sound he makes. He has 3 options. He takes a sound he makes and makes it louder to the point where it pierces eardrums and stuff like that. So there's one that has a risk-reward tied to it. It's the snap. It hits everything within 20 feet around him. Enemies, allies, himself, 2 death saving throws. The way I run my game is if someone gets hit while down, it's 2 fails.
Oh, so it's not a particular type of damage. It's just if they're hit while down, it's automatic.
If you take damage while down, I'm not going to include like, oh, they rolled down the hill damage. But if someone shoves them off a ledge and they hit the ground, 2 death save throws. That makes sense?
Yes, that's exactly what happened to me in my campaign, but it was just because, you're falling 100 feet and then hitting a concrete wall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're going to take double.
Yeah, so it's...
But you're saying, like, if they take, a dagger's worth of damage, that's still double.
Yeah, because
that makes sense.
Hitting someone while they're down. So Percival does that. So she failed her death saving throw. And keep in mind, she's an NPC. The party does not know she has death saving throws.
Because she's invisible.
Because she's invisible and she's not part of their group. She's an enemy that's working with them just this one time to save her friend who's being mind controlled. So they don't realize that this bad guy has saving throws because normal monsters and NPCs and bad guys and bosses you run into don't have saving throws. But they do because they're supposed to be like a counter party. So all of this goes on, and Percy uses a spell and damages her and kills her. Does her 2 death saving throws, so now she's dead. Then he tries to heal her while she's still invisible. He has not dropped concentration, so no one knows she's dead. Finally, combat ends. Everyone's at like really low health. They finally knocked the main girl out. And they said, screw it, our goal is to get her ring off. She might be dead, but the other girl we tried to save is alive. We're going to cut her finger off because we can't get the ring off and we're booking it. So we're about to find out where that goes. Because they got to go back in the camp and save everybody else who's still in their cell. So their ticket out, their free ride to get out of there is dead. And Percy killed her.
Yeah, that is a sticky situation.
Oh, yeah, it's a sticky situation. But I think we've rambled long enough on our campaigns and how they're going. So let's actually get into the topic of this week's session. Specifically, we've already covered melee. We've already covered ranged physical. We're going to be tackling ranged magic damage classes.
Or just magic damage in general, because most of them are going to be ranged spells.
Yes.
We'll have a few melee attacks, Acid Splash and Booming Blade and stuff like that. But
correct.
For the majority, these classes they benefit and they are proficient at spell slinging.
Correct.
Throwing magical damage from a ways away, doing massive amounts of burst damage, or just consistent damage with being able to switch up the damage types, such as, Witch Orb or Chromatic Orb?
Correct.
Things like that.
So, one thing I do want to point out this week, we will touch on, but we're not going to directly cover clerics and paladins. Yes, they have magic damage. Yes, they do damage. However, we feel that they're not quite the same as the other 3 sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. They have a lot more supporty, they have a lot of utility, as well as the damage they can provide. The 3 classes we chose for the magic damage, specifically, their real shining spot is doing damage with spells. And
Yeah, that's a fair assumption or a fair explanation of this.
yeah. So we can go ahead and start it off with my least favorite of the 3, the Sorcerer. What do you think are some pros the Sorcerer has going for it?
Well, the whole thing with Sorcerer are the fact that they can have an infinite amount of spell slots. You're going to take a rest. Okay, well, convert sorcery points to more spell slots. Get a lot more spells. You can
Mm-hmm.
use your meta magic to cast 2 spells in a turn, which is huge.
Oh, that's a big
if you
one.
have the higher spell slots. You can have subtle casting, where you don't have to actually say anything. You can whisper it and still have the spell take effect. I mean, their meta magic, the ability they have to manipulate the spells they do cast is phenomenal. The problem is they don't seem to have as much utility or as much power for anything aside from just combat. Like the wizards have a bunch of enchantments that sorcerers might not necessarily have access to. Feeble Mind comes to mind. I mean, once you're feeble minded, you can't really cast much, kind of thing. But the sorcerers, the few that I've come across, they tend to play very powerful, very um, not entitled. That's the wrong word. But very confident in their
Mm-hmm.
ability type characters. It's not often you'll come across a sorcerer that seems like a timid magic user.
Right.
No, most people that play sorcerers are proud of their bloodline, their heritage. I have this magic. It's part of my family's line. I'm going to use it to the best of my ability, and you can't tell me otherwise, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. The pros, I think you mentioned those fairly well, is their meta magic. The ability to just change the way a spell works slightly, to increase its range, to cast it quietly, to cast an AoE spell in the middle of your teammates if they're in the middle of a brawl and not hurt your allies and give them advantage on the saving throw is huge for some of those spells they get access to, like a fireball. Dead center of like 3 allies and 3 enemies, and all of your allies get advantage is huge. So that's some of their pros, is definitely their meta magics. I think one of their cons is the lack of variety in their spell options once you start playing. The sorcerer has a set amount of spells they can learn, and that set amount of spells is stuck. I know the last 2 sorcerers I've played and seen play, they have the amount of spells prepped that they can cast that day. And they're kind of shoehorned into one damage type, one playstyle, depending on the subclass they choose. Like the fire subclass, I don't remember the exact name of it for the base game, is very limited in the spell choices it has. And it kind of leans into what you had happened in your campaign this past week. You're stuck with only fire type spells. That's a problem EO is having in my current campaign as a sorcerer. When things are immune or resistant to fire, he is basically useless in combat. He has no utility spells. He has a chromatic orb, but he doesn't like using it because it's kind of the only thing he can do. He wants to have options. So there are ways around it. The one I've best found was for DMs to give their sorcerer something extra. Talk with your player, talk with your DM, see if you can get at least 1 or 2 alternate damage types in your kit that still kind of fits your theme. Like right now, he's doing fire and lightning. They kind of go hand in hand. If you've ever seen Avatar, you can lightning bend if you can fire bend, kind of thing. So just keeping an eye on it, knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at. Sorcerers are good for damage and the utility they have with their different types of casting. However, they're going to lack when it comes to variety of things they can actually do in combat and out of combat in some cases.
Yeah, they definitely seem to be very one trick pony, kind of very tunnel minded. But yeah, the sorcerers, the spells they do get are phenomenal.
Right.
Like melts minute meteors. I mean, every sorcerer and their mother is going to be taking fireball. The poster boy of D&D spells. How does the saying go or the meme goes? It's I didn't ask how big the room was. I said I cast fireball.
I didn't ask if my ally was in the way. I said I cast fireball on that guy right there. Yeah, he's next to 3 of my comrades, but that little goblin's gonna die.
Isn't that something else that you can do with the sorcerer, or you can actually choose to have it not affect your allies within the AoE range?
It's careful spell, and it still affects them. All entities you deem as allies get advantage on the saving throw.
Okay, but they're still going to take the damage
They
even
can
half.
They can still take the damage even half, but they are more likely to not take as much than the enemy who's not going to have advantage.
No, that sounds great.
So, Sorcerer is my least favorite. I really have to sit down and almost homebrew sorcerers. I like the wild magic class because it gives you some variety and some weird stuff can happen in the middle of combat sometimes. But to me, sorcerers always felt so one note that I couldn't do anything outside of that without having to talk to my DM ahead of time. I always feel like, well, all I have is fire damage. I guess I'm doing fire damage this time. Or all I have is lightning damage and shadow damage. I guess that's just all I can do. It's not that I feel useless. It's that I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over because I've got 15 spells total to choose from. They're always prepped. And I'm always using 3 of them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that just means that you're not being put in a position where you can cast or where you would want to cast something other than those 3 major ones.
Right. I'm not saying
I mean,
I'm without a fault or the DM's without fault, but it's difficult to get into those other situations, if that makes sense.
It's much easier to pigeonhole yourself by playing that class versus any other class. But
Correct.
I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of what D&D is. And I'm not defending the sorcerer as much as, I'm not trying to say that it's the best class out there. But I mean, if you're a warlock, typically you're going to Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, and then that's it.
Right.
You might cast a domination or a banishment kind of thing, but you're just going to Eldritch Blast almost every single entire turn.
Right.
If you're a fighter or a barbarian, you're just going to swing, swing, swing. Okay, I'm going to run over here. I'm going to swing, swing, swing. I'm going to run over here. I'm going to swing, swing, swing.
Right. I think the downside I'm seeing or the difference I'm seeing between those two is Eldritch Blast and your swings don't cost anything. If you're playing a sorcerer and you are like, oh, I can fireball, and then the enemy's resistant or they all succeed the save and no one dies. Fireball's the only thing I can do in this situation, kind of thought. And it doesn't work.
Yes.
That's why I dislike the sorcerer.
That makes sense.
It's not that they're one note, it's that they're one note and don't have as many options to overcome an obstacle that blocks their one thing they do well. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
But is there anything else you can think on to add to the sorcerer? I know
I'm looking over their abilities now. I mean, Clockwork Soul, I think, is a slightly different sorcerer, and Wild Magic, as you kind of touched on, is it allows for a bunch of RNG to kind of come into play.
Yeah, which
And
can
Wild
spice things
Magic
up.
is yes, Wild Magic is something that I would love to dabble in, either for Barbarian or for Sorcerer. But I don't know, it's just the meta magic seems like a very difficult um, kind of mechanic to get into as one of your first characters.
It's definitely not for an early player.
Because yeah, you don't know when you want to empower something versus quick cast, or if you want to twin something and quick cast it, or there's what 3, 6, 9. It's 11 or 12 different abilities that you
Right.
can use with meta magic, and it's definitely not for a beginner. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, if you want to pick it up and definitely play around with it, but I would not recommend it for one of your first 3 to 5 characters. Unless you're playing in a campaign that you're watching somebody and seeing what they do, you'll be able to tell, okay, well that works, that doesn't work, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of the sorcerer. But since we're kind of wrapped up on that, we can get to my favorite class to play.
The other charisma character
The other
or
one.
class?
Yeah, the warlock. I love the warlock class. And it's not, and we mentioned one of the cons already in passing on the sorcerer. For the warlock, it's Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, because it's such a good cantrip. The base game Eldritch Blast does force damage. I can't think of an enemy off the top of my head that isn't homebrewed that's resistant to force damage. I'm sure there is one,
I can't either.
but I can't think of one. And it's a good cantrip that will carry you through like almost the entire game. And warlocks sit in a happy place with me because of the way their spell slots work. You have a certain amount of spell slots, and that's all of your spell slots. It's not a lot. It's actually really, really little. I'm pretty sure it's like 1 for like 5 levels or so. It might be 2, but I really enjoy that, if that makes sense. Because your spells are always cast at the highest level you can cast them at. And most of them are not, oh, they succeeded their saving throw. Well, it doesn't affect them. Most of
They're
them
not save
are,
or suck.
yeah, it's not save or suck. It's, oh, they saved. Well, it still slows them down. Or they still take damage, but they're not crippled, kind of things. Most of your spells are like that. So the reason I like them is because their spells can be combat changing. Most of their spells will turn the tide or alter the battlefield in some way. That is why I
Yes.
enjoy the warlock.
That is an absolute great reason to love the warlock. However, once you get to the higher levels, I wouldn't say it starts to taper off, but you have your mystic arcanums
Mm-hmm.
or mystic arcanum, however you want to pronounce it. You can only cast one spell you get to pick one level 6, one level 7, one level 8. I don't know if you get a 9th level
I
arcanum.
think you do get one.
But yeah, but once you get up to that point, whereas the sorcerer and the wizard probably have, 3 or 4 8th level spell slots at level
Mm-hmm.
20, the warlocks get one, and it's one spell. It's not like several spells and can prepare one. It's you pick one, and that's what you're stuck with.
Correct.
So if you pick wrong, you're never going to use it.
Right. And I guess this is just the Dark Souls player in me. I like having that one thing, and then it's a resource you hold on to, and you use it at the right moment, and it flips the battlefield. Or that's even like the magic the gathering player in me, where I hold on to that one card from the beginning of the game. Oh, I finally have enough land to play it. Now I've won and flip the whole board on you, kind of thing. That's just how
Yep.
I like to play games. So the Warlock fits for me. It's not going to fit for everybody else. But you've already mentioned all those downsides that you get very few spells that you can actually use, but you get them back on a short rest.
You get all
No
your spell
other,
slots back on a short rest.
yes, no
Yes.
other class gets that.
Yes.
They
And that
get one
is,
or two spell slots back, but they don't get all of them.
yep. So basically, every day, depending on how your game is played, in some games, I know a long rest is, yeah, you're spending a day and a half just relaxing.
Right.
But for most games, when a long rest is considered a full 8 hours sleep, so every day you get all your spell slots back. Or excuse me, you can cast all your spells, and then if you rest for about an hour, you just take a quick power nap, you get all your spell slots
All
back.
of them back. And that's just part of the reason the Warlock is my favorite. There's something that I do when I play a Warlock or when a DM or when I'm DMing a Warlock, especially for newer players. I don't, or especially for experienced players. Newer players, I would recommend just keeping the way you play your Warlock how it is. There's something I really enjoy doing, and that is changing your Eldritch Blast and altering your spell list beyond what the base game allows. Have to talk to your DM about it. You have to talk to your player about it. If I'm playing a Fiend Warlock, I think it's more thematic that my Eldritch Blast is closer to a Firebolt.
I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a Celestial Warlock, maybe make it Radiant damage.
Radiant damage. If you're I don't remember the name, the Warlock of the Great Old Ones.
Yep.
Psychic damage. Like, that's literally what that's all about, is telepathy and breaking into people's minds and things like that. The downside of that is things are resistant to those other damage types. Fire damage, psychic damage, ice damage, all of those other damage types. There are a plethora of creatures and enemies that are going to be resistant or immune to some of those effects. That's why the force damage is really good. But I also really love being able to step more into that RP of, oh, I'm useless with my Eldritch Blast here. I have to use a spell this time. For this combat, I have to use a spell to be useful. Let me run around and take some aggro and sprint away and use my spell. Oh, what is it I always use? Blink. Let me take aggro and just pop in and try to hit ads and avoid being hit by the big guy, because the big guy's immune to what I can do. Let my party handle that. Or I also love getting into the RP and using Eldritch Blast or something out of combat, and I can really focus in on like that psychic damage I have if I'm RPing for something. I can't come up with an example off the top of my head. But that's a reason I really love the Warlock, is because yes, they have limited spells. Yes, they have limited spell slots. But those spells are game-changing, and they often lead to good results. Even if they fail, it's not the end of the world, and it wasn't a complete waste. And then the amount of RP you can do with the Warlock. You have a patron that's connected to you. You have someone that can talk to you sometimes, depending on how your patron works. And you can really dive into that. I'm connected to an alternate being that is stronger than I am and gives me power.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the reasons why Warlock was the very first character that I ever considered playing. And I think it ended up being the second character that I started to create.
Mm-hmm.
That campaign lasted all of 2 sessions until one of the party members decided to capture our NPC quest giver inside a bag of holding and rolled a nat 20, and the DM just said, you know what, screw this. I didn't even say goodbye. Just never heard from him again.
Yeah. I honestly, I don't blame him though.
Yeah, it was a dumb move to begin with, but yeah, I mean, it's at least say, okay, yeah, he's dead. You no longer know what's going on. Okay, campaign's over. See ya. Bye. Like, yeah. Um, but warlocks, like having that interaction with your patron, having that being able to be the face of the party, it's like something that I like to do because it's how you control the narrative. It's how you control the story.
Right.
It's if somebody is talking to your party, if you have the high charisma, you're going to be able to persuade and deceive and allow situations to go your way more so than if, say, the barbarian decided to talk, unless the barbarian has high charisma or just happens to say the right things.
Hmm.
You have a much better uh, bead on the situation,
Right.
which
Right.
is this. It's the same thing for bards. I mean, everyone thinks that bards are just there to seduce any and everything that breathes. And sorcerers can be the same way because charisma is their spellcasting focus. So any of those three charisma classes are great at being the face of the party. However, with your patron, you can create some outside of the normal game interactions that can change the way your character plays. It can have an effect on your personality, it can have an effect on the rest of the party inside the game. And it's just another level of detail that you can get to. So, I mean, from a story aspect, warlocks are far and away my favorite character.
Yeah. I just really love the RP side of classes as much as I enjoy their combat stuff. And warlocks give so much in that RP side because you have someone connected to you, and depending on your subclass or the way you write out your backstory, that's willing to talk back sometimes. Whereas clerics, paladins, and other holy people, they don't really have a person to person connection. At least the way I always see it is you're one of their subjects, not their what's it called? Their vassal. You know what I mean? You're just a
Yeah.
subject rather than a vassal. You're just one of
Yes.
many clerics of so and so god. Whereas the warlock, I'm one of your four chosen kind of
You're not
thing.
the yeah, you're the speaker. You're the harbinger.
Right. Yeah, that's how I see the warlock compared to the other classes that have outside connections built into their playstyle and their magic system. But that's
And
my spiel on warlocks.
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So, warlocks, to sum it up, warlocks have very good spells, very good RP implications, very, very good cantrip, Eldritch Blast. And of course, you can change that with your subclass and then your different Eldritch something. Don't remember what they're called.
Invocations.
Invocations. Yeah, your invocations that change the way your Eldritch Blast works, or they can also change and give you certain spells you can use multiple times a day on top of things. Those are usually utility focused rather than damage focused. But that's some of their pros. Their con is you are really limited in the spell slots you have to cast with. Very limited. I want to say it's like max of 3 by the end of the game, maybe 4. So their flexibility is less, but their impact is higher. That's the trade-off you get for the warlock. And that's why I really like them. So, unless you have anything else to add, I think we can go ahead and move on to the last one that we're covering under the main group of 3 ranged magic damage.
No, I think that's basically everything that I would like to say on the warlocks. I know that there are very powerful subclasses that don't necessarily deal with the magic side
Mhm.
of things. Warlocks seems to be the most commonly splashed character class specifically for melee abilities due to their Hexblade subclass, and that's something that we can touch base in a future session.
Mhm.
So even if you are not going to be a caster, Warlock is definitely something to at least know about and look into. Because
Right.
for any sort of melee class, fighter, even a rogue, paladins is in particular, or sorcerers, most people will splash one level, maybe two levels into Warlock just to get specific, the Hexblade, or just to get the spell slots that they can get back on a short rest.
Just to get the Eldritch Blast too. Like it's just
That too.
so powerful. But continuing on, the last one under the main three we need to cover is wizards. Now, wizards are, in my opinion,
Arguably the most powerful class in the game.
arguably, yes. Their trade-off is squishy, 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 little baby boy. So,
Excuse? They're not squishy. They're non-existent. You breathe on them and
they're
they're dead.
dead. Oh yeah, they fall over like
I think it
nobody's
was
business.
was it first or it might have been third edition? They say, yeah, I take 1d4 of wizard damage. I die.
Mm-hmm.
Like wizards have
The
at level
smallest hit
7.
die.
At level 7, you might have 36 hit points sometimes.
Oh yeah, if you roll low enough, definitely. So we can continue on though. What are the bright points of the wizard? What are the big things that stand out to you as like, why would you want to play this? What's the good part about them? The pros.
Well, just the fact that they have all the utility of any class in the game. All their spells are going to be based on different things that you can do. Yeah, there are some evocation wizards that will be doing damage, but you are going to be the intelligent one. You're going to be the one coming up with all the plans. You're going to be the one that can, enchant people and charm them and get people to act your way. You're going to be the illusionist where nobody's going to be able to find you. You're going to be a trickster. If you wanted to be the necromancer, you can start raising the dead. There is a subclass of the wizard that you can do almost anything. You want to be a melee class, go with blade singing wizards. You want to be, evocation, you can be a sorcerer but with intelligence, but you can also get all the ritual spells you could ever want.
Yeah.
But mainly what I think of when I think wizards are spells like Feeble Mind, spells that can utterly change and completely destroy things, whether that be other players. If you get into a PvP situation and somebody doesn't, they don't rub you the right way, it can be, the BBEG. If you can get this off, Feeble Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the BBEG, if they're a caster, they forget how to cast spells. They become a toddler that you can just walk up and just destroy
Right.
if you can get that off.
Right.
But yeah, wizards, I mean, for the trade off, they are glass cannons. They are super powerful. Their potential is off the charts. They don't have the charisma, so they're not the face of the party. They don't have the hit points, so you will be running around frightened for your life. But when you can cast whatever spells you want, you are you're in a very good spot.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head with their utility. The wizard has damage spells. They get access to fireball, they get access to call lightning, they get access to chain lightning, they get access to all of those damage spells. But they also get teleport, they get dimension door, they get feeble mind, like you said a second ago. They get the access to get different things in their kit to alter the way combat is going, to alter the situation, to change how things are going to happen in the future. It is very utility heavy. And I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about my current campaign. Our wizard has a spell that causes people to be petrified. I believe it's 4th level and it petrifies an enemy, but it's not like stone petrification like a Medusa. It's just their muscles freeze up and they can't move, they can't speak, but they can still move their eyes and see, they can hear, they're conscious, but they're frozen kind of thing. And the trade-off for that is, of course, that if they get hit, they're undone. But it's a utility spell, and it's one of those succeed or suck kind of spells where if they succeed the saving throw, there's no effect. That's a big trade-off with a lot of the wizard spells, especially the more impactful ones, is they just kind of don't work if they succeed. However,
when they do succeed,
it is intense and can really flip the tide of battle, especially in boss fights with Feeble Mind or the one I just mentioned. So what if everyone holds their action and everyone all attacks at once and they all get advantage because the only person they're fighting is petrified for 1 minute? That's long enough for everyone to get in position and hold an attack. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it can be really, really fun to play them. And we've already mentioned their downside. They are like flypaper. They fall apart. They get ripped to shreds if they're in the middle of combat. So hats off to anyone who wants to play a melee wizard. You do you. Go Abjuration and Booming Blade and buff spells for weapons. Cool.
And Blade Singer.
Yeah, cool. You do that. I've seen wizards with stupid high ACs, but guess what? They still have just at 100 health at max level. I'm sorry. I'm not playing like that and being in melee range. I ain't doing it. You can't make me. And as much as I love warlocks, I really enjoy the combat playstyle of the wizard more. Warlock's my favorite class because it has RP implications and it has this tide-turning combat ability. Wizard has the same thing, and it fits into my playstyle for other games way more than the Warlock does. But I don't like being that squishy. So I rarely play wizards, even though they're my favorite. They're my favorite style of play, if that makes sense.
I'd say that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So just kind of the recap. You have the sorcerers who are very easy to pigeonhole yourself into having one or two types of damage, and that's it.
Yeah.
All you're going to be doing is casting spells. You're going to be locked into a certain style of play.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have the charisma where you can play kind of the face of the party if you need to. You can, bend people to your will and, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
The warlock, you also have meta magic. You can change spells, whether that be you want to cast a second spell as a bonus action, quicken cast. You want to cast a spell twice, twin cast. You want to empower it and upscale it, upcast it. You can do that. You can also create many, many more sorcerers or spell slots using your sorcery points as well. So you have the ability to make a bunch of your fireball spell slots, but you're only still going to be casting fireball.
Correct.
Warlocks, you have much more RP potential with the interactions that you may or may not have with your patron. You have your charismatic face of the party interactions as well. You get all of your spell slots, albeit, many, many less spell slots than your counterparts. However, you get all of your spell slots back on a short rest as opposed to a long rest. So you can have just as many spell slots if you rest 3 times a day as, a sorcerer might, having, just once a day long rest kind of thing. The wizards have the most potential overall as a caster, but they are super squishy because they have, I think it's a D4 or D6 hit die. And the fact that, most of your spells that you're going to get for free are ritual casts. But you are not charismatic necessarily. Most of your spells are also going to be save or suck, as opposed to hitting, and if they fail to save, they take half damage. With a wizard, it's going to be most of your spells you either succeed or you don't. But when you succeed, they do a lot for your
Yes.
party.
Yeah,
And
they
I
do
think,
a ton.
but yeah,
But
that is those seem to be all the pure magic casters.
mhm. There are
Mm.
others I wanted to at least mention. I don't think we need to go detail because we're going to cover two of them next week anyways. I do want to mention clerics do have a similar damage output to the other three classes we just mentioned if you're not using your healing spells. And you're only using your damage spells that you do have access to, which are very good at times. However, I don't believe that's the best way to play the cleric. It's definitely fun to be a cleric and be one-shotting things compared to the rest of your party. But I don't think it's the way I would like to play a cleric. And it's not their intention. I do also want to
Well,
mention, yeah.
if you do have 2 or even 4 clerics in a party, by all means,
Oh,
roll a pure
oh,
damage. I mean,
yeah,
this podcast isn't to say don't play a cleric, if
yeah.
you're going to play this way because you don't want us to play it that way. But the whole point of it is to say that there are some subclasses, and again, we're going for a majority of the subclasses being ranged magical damage, which is why we picked these 3. When we go over the cleric, that might be a session in itself because of all the different types of
Oh my
clerics, because of the subclasses, similar to
Oh, yeah.
similar to wizards. But for the most part, clerics are typically healers and support slash utility casters.
Mhm.
But there are some pure damage dealers that you can get through.
Yeah. And like you said it rightly, we're not telling you not to play them that way. I'm just saying I don't have fun with them that way. And yes, they can do a lot of damage, but I find that they really shine in other situations. I do also want to mention paladins. Yes, they do magic damage. Yes, they can do damage from a range, but it's really limited. They're half casters, so they don't get near as many spell slots or near as powerful spells, but they have a lot of support stuff that goes into them. Another one we mentioned previously, magic fighters.
But
Yeah.
also, before we move on, paladins are also shotguns.
Yeah.
If you use a bonus action to cast Branding Smite, and then you go up and you wallop somebody with your attack, you Divine Smite and Brandishing Smite on it. Boom! There's three types of damage all at once, and then you
Yeah.
can attack again and Divine Smite again, and you just basically did 5 full attacks with 2 swings.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And that's the way they're written. I don't let people play like that. You can do the
Yeah.
brandishing smite and the smite, but you can't do 2 smites in one turn. And the way I play the game, because then they are literally out damaging everyone on the field, no matter what the other person does.
Until they run out of spell slots. And if
Yeah,
you have 3 or 4 different encounters per long rest, then that's one way to combat that.
yeah. And with a lot of players, they're encouraged with them being allowed to do multiple smites in a turn. They're really encouraged to do most of the damage, and then if combat goes longer than they think, then they're useless. Then all of their healing spells and their support spells they have prepped are useless. And then they end up not doing anything but just smiting and just wiping the floor with everybody. And I limit it down so that it really gives you a choice on whether or not you want to cast a spell or use a smite this turn. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because if I only have 1 spell slot left and we're still in combat and I've only used 1 smite per turn this whole time and I've still only got 1 spell slot left, maybe I don't want to smite.
Correct.
Kind of thing.
And that's something that your party really has to, well, as a paladin, you really have to figure out when to use your spell slots.
Right.
Because until you hit a spot where you run out of spell slots when you really, really need it, um, you're never going to realize that, oh, I probably shouldn't be doing damage this entire time because I need to make sure that I can heal when, something goes wrong. But if you're getting, a a long rest between every fight, yeah, paladins are going to seem overpowered and they are going to outdamage the barbarian. They're going to outdamage the rogue with their sneak attack.
Right.
Um, yeah, with the paladins, it really has to come down to striking a balance between how much damage you are actually doing versus the rests that you get in between.
Hmm. But to continue on, there's another one is magic fighters. We've already touched on them before. There's options to get magic damage and to get a magical weapon as a fighter or a barbarian or the other classes. You still have options for magic damage, though they're not really built in to a lot of those classes. And then the last one I do want to mention is also arcane tricksters. They do get access to some damage spells, but not much. The arcane trickster rogue does not get a lot of options when it comes to damage and magic, but it's still there as a potential option. I did want to mention it.
Yeah, and it is good to mention that because most people don't assume rogues are able to cast spells.
Right.
But you do have, the intellect spells, or excuse me, you do have the mastermind subclass as well as the arcane trickster. I haven't seen an arcane trickster actually played, in more than just a one shot. And it seems like they're still doing a bunch of melee and their casting is kind of an afterthought.
Yeah. In combat, it can feel that way, especially if they're playing a dagger rogue rather than a hand crossbow rogue or a crossbow rogue.
That makes sense.
So
But yeah, I think that's it. I mean,
that's
are there any other classes that you feel make good casters?
not really. Rangers come to mind, but you really want to be doing your weapon damage as a ranger. I can't think of any other class that comes to mind as doing magic for the sake of doing magic.
How about druids?
Oh, I completely forgot about druids. Yes and no, but I really think they fit into that same class as cleric and paladin when it comes to utility. Instead of healing, it's crowd control. A lot of those druid spells do crowd control rather than flat damage.
I agree. The only druids I've ever seen or played have been kind of
Shaped.
hybrid classes.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ones that I always hear about are the the multi classes with barbarian. You make the war or the were barbarian,
Yeah.
and it's literally werebear with barbarian, and you have like 100 hit points at level 3 or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how they play at higher levels, but that seems to be the most popular one that people are always complaining about it or as being meta or overpowered.
But yeah, I feel like those are better mentioned next week in our last
I
episode
agree.
of this 4-part class breakdown series.
4 or 5, yeah. There's gonna be a little bit more.
All we have left is artificers, paladins, clerics, and druids, right?
Bards.
Oh, bards! Fuck, bards fit here
Yeah.
too. God damn it! Sorry about the language,
Yeah.
but God.
Yeah. There's going to be more than 4, I promise.
All right, but I think that kind of wraps up our specific magic damage
I would agree. I think that's
episode.
about it.
Yeah, I think that's about
Yeah.
it. There's one thing I do want to
Oh,
mention. What you got?
one other thing, just to kind of bring it up because it kind of fits in this episode, and it has to do with the one of the cons of playing a sorcerer, as well as what happened to me in my campaign, and what you were saying is EO happens with yours, is ways to counteract or combat if somebody gets into the position where they are doing one type of damage. Something that you can do is talk to your DM and see if there's something that they can do. Like the past 3 fights that we've had in our Friday campaign have been all fire immune creatures.
Mm-hmm.
My only damage is fire, being
Right.
a red and gold dragon. as well as having my spells, I just got access to third level spells. And the most useful one tends to be Fireball. But also there's Mel's Minute Meteors, which does a decent amount of damage. But again, it's fire, 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 fire. Um, if you get into that type of a situation, aside from asking your DM kindly to not use fire immune creatures, or in my case, creatures that I can't hit with a spell since I only have cantrips and first and second level spells to attack with. Um, what are some ways or what are some spells that you can think of that are within the first 2 to 3 levels of spells that people can take that can potentially change their type of damage or find some way to get around only doing a specific type of damage? Without
The
homebrewing something, what would you
the
suggest?
one that comes to mind fits all versions of sorcerers that I can think of, and that'd be Chromatic Orb. It gives them one option. It's only one, but it gives them one option. I believe it's level 1, maybe it's level 2, that they can throw out, and they can change the damage type on it.
And they
So,
can upcast it.
and they can upcast it, so you can cast it higher and do more damage. The only problem with it is you have to roll to hit. It is a roll to hit spell. It is not a saving throw spell. So you can miss with it, and you can waste a spell slot and do no damage. But it's an option, and it gives you something different. Call Lightning, I believe, is a level 3. If your DM's okay with you having it, Call Lightning's a good one. And there's a couple others I can't think of off the top of my head. EO in my campaign has Chromatic Orb. He doesn't like using it because he always misses with it. He can roll to hit in melee and hit almost all the time, and then he can roll to hit with his spell using his spellcasting modifier and roll like a 3. Not including his bonuses, of course, but he'll roll a 3 and only roll like an 8 or a 12 to hit. I don't know what his bonuses are
Yeah,
off the
that
top of my
doesn't
head.
sound fun.
Oh, dude, every time he uses Chromatic Orb, it misses. Every time. No. Every time he casts it at first level, it misses. If he upcasts it, it misses. If he casts it at first level, it hits. That's what it is. Every time he upcasts,
Wow.
it's like, oh, I'm gonna hit him. I'm gonna do big damage, and it misses. I'm
Oh,
just gonna
jeez.
cast Chromatic Orb, level 1. Oh, it hit him. Cool. Almost max damage. Would have loved to upcast it. Too late now.
Oh man.
Oh, so unlucky.
The other one that I found recently is lightning bolt.
Yeah.
It is an AOE and it's 100 feet long, 5 feet wide. So it's literally a line, 100-foot line that will do about the same damage as fireball,
Mhm.
but not in a circle AOE. It's just a line AOE,
Yeah.
but it does lightning damage as opposed to fire. I was
Correct.
just trying to see if there was any more that you can think of off the top of your head that do that.
Thunder Wave. Just other types. Anything that's another type of damage. If it's on the wizard spell list, I would talk to your DM and just see if he'll let you swap it out for one of the ones you are supposed to get. Because, in my opinion, one of the reasons I hate playing Sorcerer is you're stuck with that damage type unless your DM lets you change. So I would talk to your DM and see if you can pick one spell from the wizard spell list that does a different type of damage. And just talk to him. If you don't talk to your DM about it and it becomes up a problem, bring it up. Don't be scared to ask your DM for things. If you're scared to ask your DM for things, I don't want to get into that conversation actually. So, but just try to bring it up.
Yeah,
And
remember, it's not the DM against the players.
yeah,
The DM is just the storyteller. The players are the ones actually telling the story or choosing the way the story goes. So yeah, I mean, talk to your DM. If the answer is no, then okay, then you need to find something else on your own. But your DM should be knowledgeable enough and should be willing enough and friendly enough to suggest things to you.
right,
Why don't you try this? Or, what about this? Or, hey, have you thought about trying to craft some magic items that might allow you to do this? Or the DM
right.
might have a great idea to add something from your backstory or something to flavor it, and
Mm,
all of a sudden, boom, you're changing your thing. It's a
yeah.
homebrew type thing. I mean, there are a lot of different things you can do. I mean, the DM is God. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if the DM wants your fireball to do ice damage, sure, you can do that because the DM said yes.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, talk with your party, talk with your DM first, because sometimes the DMs might consider that metagaming if you're having conversations outside of character, outside of the game, talking strategy and whatnot.
Yeah.
That may be frowned upon. Typically, it won't.
Yeah. It's
But
not in my
yeah, I
game.
mean, never feel afraid or uncomfortable to ask. The worst they can say is no, which means you're not in any better or any worse position than you were before. You can only benefit yourself from, literally talking things out and just saying, hey, what about this? Now if you're doing that every like 2 minutes, hey DM, what about this? Hey DM, what about this? Hey, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I break that? Can I do this? Can I
Mm-hmm.
do that?
Yeah.
It,
It
it,
gets a
it
little
can start to
annoying.
get grimy.
Yeah. The.
But
Hmm?
but I mean, asking once in a while or asking for some things that are an actual, potentially a problem that might make the game unfun for you.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole point. Again, this game is a game as long as it's fun.
Right.
Once it stops being fun, it becomes a job, it becomes a chore, and you're not going to want to play it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you're having fun, I mean, as long as everybody's having fun to the best of their ability, that's what the game is about.
Yeah. That's the end goal, is to have fun. The last thing I want to touch on is an example of sorcerers being weak and the DM giving them a way around it. So when my party went to an underwater city, they had items that let them breathe underwater for a set amount of time. So they were underwater for about a day and a half, about 36 hours. During that time, all of the combat they did, fire spells, if done underwater, are at half damage. Everyone is resistant to fire when underwater because you're literally under the water. Make sense? That's the way I
Yes.
thought about it. So yes, you can still do things, but you're significantly nerfed. And we have a fire sorcerer on our team, in our party. So everything he was doing was at half. And he brought it up to me, and this was his quest line they were on. So during the process of it, he came up to me and said, "Hey, I kind of feel useless in combat. I'm just wanting to let you know that that's how I feel right now, and it's kind of annoying." I said, "I know. It's on purpose." And he got a little annoyed and questioned me a bit, and I said, "Just trust me. Just go with it. I understand I understand your fire damage, and that's all you can do, and it's at half all the time, other than your chromatic orb. I understand. Give me time." So he did, and then eventually he found a weapon, and that weapon was the item he needed for the quest that they were on. Once he attuned to it, he can cast Call Lightning twice a day, basically for free, but it uses his action and stuff like that. And he can give advantage to a saving throw on an ally or impose disadvantage on an enemy attacking an ally once a day. Basically, he can see the future and say, "Look out," to an ally who's about to get attacked, and they can dodge a little better. Make sense? Because
That's pretty good.
That's the
Yeah.
point of the weapon, is it's supposed to let him see the future. And it also has another ability that lets him try to get a premonition of things and actually see the future. But if he fails, he loses a max hit die. So there's a huge trade-off to it to know what's going to
Permanently
happen
loses?
until a level up, or until he succeeds on getting a premonition. So the premonition, he has
okay.
to like force his mind into the weapon to see the future. And if he fails to do so, he loses a max hit die. Not a hit die, just a max hit die. So
Okay.
if he succeeds, he goes back to normal. So he can keep trying until he succeeds, or loses all of his max hit die and basically putters out on the spot.
Gotcha.
So, because the way we've been playing our campaign is we rarely use all of them anyways. So this gives him something to play with because he's kind of in the back line. He actually rarely gets hit in combat other than when he's the target, you know what I mean? If he starts the combat.
Yep.
So it really gives him something to do RP-wise compared to the rest of the party, and now he has lightning damage. For free. Doesn't cost his spell slots, so if something's immune to fire, he can use lightning twice and then use cantrips the rest of the time, or chromatic orb. It gave him some options, and that's something I did as a DM. I had that planned before he brought to me the problem because I understood that he is doing less damage than everyone else right now for the next 5 sessions.
And it really shows, it kind of sets him up like, okay, well, yeah, if the party feels like he's getting useless in combat, now all of a sudden he has this really powerful item
That
kind of goes,
really
okay.
flips the tables on his abilities.
Yes, but at the same point, if he was as effective as everyone else for the entire time, it's be like, wait, so why is he getting this super powerful artifact?
Yep.
You kind of foreshadowed it and balanced it well
Yep.
so that hopefully the rest of the party doesn't feel outshined by giving him this artifact, even though you had probably already had planned to give it to him before.
There's limitations on who can attune to it. Those with celestial, draconic, or something else type of abilities. So only 3 people in the party could attune to it. One of them's the wizard, who's Azamar. He has celestial blood. One of them's the dragonborn. He's a dragonborn. He has draconic blood. Or the sorcerer, who's a dragon sorcerer. Who gets the weapon.
Fair enough.
The monk can't attune to it. Why would the monk need a dagger? The wizard's not going to be in melee. He doesn't need the dagger. Plus, he's got 3 attunement slots already. The only one left, sorcerer. So, but I think that's a good spot to leave off. We left you with some tips, tricks, the pros and cons, what's good, what's bad about those 3 classes. Talked about our campaign a little bit. So the last thing is I want to shout out what's coming up. Tomorrow afternoon, I have my D&D campaign streamed on my Twitch, which is going to be in the link below if you're on YouTube. Otherwise, it's twitch.tv/smugf5. And then Mindz, I think you have a game tomorrow as well.
Yep. Twitch TV /the_Mindz I. That'll start at 8 p.m. PST.
8 p.m. Mine's at 7 p.m. CST. Central
so 5 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah.
Or 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, right. So the last thing is probably not next session, but the session after. I think I'm going to be done with Elden Ring. At least my first playthrough, because, oh my god, this game is good. But I don't want to talk about it too much. We've already gone over time. But keep an eye out for probably session after next as a little break from this little series we're doing before we round it all off, to talk about a mostly spoiler-free review of Elden Ring. I'm going to do my best to not spoil things because I know you think you might pick it up. I'm sure some people that are listening might want to pick it up if they haven't already. It is very good, and I will write down any complaints, criticisms, and what I like about it, and almost do a whole episode on it because I could talk about that game for hours. It is so much fun.
I'm sure you could.
Oh my god. But I think that's a good place to leave it off. Anything else you want to shout out? Anything else you want to talk about before we leave it out?
No, I think we're good. Hope to see you guys tomorrow, and we'll catch you later.
All right, we'll catch you later. Bye, everybody.